I told Angela's story a lot because everybody, when they see you, how's Angela? Um, I told her story, and you almost get exhausted from telling the story. Um, I would have loved to somebody say, "Hey, man, let's go grab coffee. I want to talk," and for have a buddy of mine to say, "Hey, dude, how are you doing?" Because everybody wants to know how Angela's doing, which I totally understand, but I can't think of very many times that I ever had somebody say, "Hey, how are you doing?" That would have been cool.
You are listening to the Go Earn Your Salt podcast, brought to you by Salty Electrolytes. On this podcast, your host, Riley Rogers, explores the stories of people who get after it, get things done, and earn their salt. You will hear from high achievers who discuss what makes them tick, how they got to where they are today, and where they're headed tomorrow. Perhaps this podcast will help you go earn your salt. Today we've got my friends Jeremy and Angela. They have some just incredible story, incredible background, and I invited them on here today because over the years, as I've learned more and more about them and the things they're involved in and their life story, it's just pretty inspiring. So, Jeremy, Angela, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure for sure. So, listen, if each of you could take a second and just introduce yourself, talk about your life, where you grew up, what life was like as a kid, would be awesome.
Go ahead, huh?
So I actually am a native Idahoan, born and raised here, born and raised in Emmett, Idaho. I've lived in the Treasure Valley all my life. For most of my life, I was raised by a single mom. My dad was actually killed in a motorcycle accident when I was 11 years old. So my mom raised me and my sister, who's actually only about 11 months older than I am, from about 11 on. I have lived in either Boise, Nampa, or Emmett pretty much all my life. I went to college at Boise State, first one in my family to go to college and graduate. Got a criminal justice degree over there, and just kind of met Jeremy and been hanging out in this area ever since.
What was the attraction to criminal justice for you?
An easy A, because I had messed up my freshman year in college. I had first time experiencing freedom and wasn't going to classes, and I didn't even know anything about criminal justice. I really had somebody who lived in the dorms who said, if you need to bring your GPA up, you should take a criminal justice class. It's the easiest A you're ever going to get. And I'm like, I need that. That's seriously how I even heard about criminal justice.
After Jeremy's intro, we're going to take that from there, though, because you got bit by a bug in there somewhere.
Yep, I did.
It became more than just an easy A, but
yeah.
Jeremy, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I was born in Glendive, Montana. We moved to Idaho. My dad got a job was working for Butchery Foods, and he got an assistant manager job up in Lewiston, Idaho. And then he ended up getting a manager job down in Boise. So we moved down to Boise. I think I was in third grade when we moved down to Boise area. I've been here pretty much ever since, other than when I graduated high school, I moved back to my hometown, working for my uncle. He owned a bulk plant for Mort Distributing, and we hauled fuel for Exxon. And I hauled fuel for him to farmers and Santa gravel pits and so on and so forth. Had my CDL and did that kind of stuff for a little while. And then mom used to call me up every night crying, asking me to come home. So I came home and went to Boise State and was going to become a fish and game officer. And I was working with the fish and game at volunteer basis, working check stations and so on and so forth. And while I was doing that and going to school, I had a buddy that came to my house one day and said, "Hey, man, there's an opening for electrical out at where he worked at." And I was like, "Okay, what's it pay?" And he told me what they paid. And I was like, "Wow, that's a lot more than a fish and game officer." So yeah, so I went down there and applied and got it and got into school and became an electrician. So other than that,
You say electrician.
Yeah.
talk a little bit about the type of work you guys do, because it's not your normal stuff.
No. So, yeah, I mean, I went through school and became a journeyman electrician and, worked my way up, worked at different places. I was non-union I went to Boise State for my electrical degree also. And then at some point we decided, uh, that I didn't want to do the union or do the regular stuff anymore. So I ended up joining the union, and which was great for us because they had great benefits and they paid really well. And then when I hired on with Quality Electric for 2 years, and then I ended up coming over to Power Plus, and I've kind of worked my way up in the ranks here. I'm now I don't work with my tools much anymore. I estimate, project manage. I'm vice president of the company. But that's kind of just a title. It's, somebody's got to sign checks and so on and so forth. So I work, the other guys in our office work just as hard as I do. It's just, except for on my end, I got into, as you were stating, I got into the signal end of things. So we do the civil work, the dirt work, installing conduit and wire and signal poles, and we do signal foundations, and we build signals and build lighting, ITS systems, all the stuff that has to do with ITD and ACHD, and yeah, we build all that fun stuff. So kind of what do I want to say? An out branch of electrical, still electrical, but kind of a I don't know what to say. They're just the out branch of it. So not a lot of people do it.
So listen, you got to remember that not all of us listen to this podcast are in the business. So you used a lot of letters in there, a lot of abbreviations. So
yeah.
when you say signals, define that for us retards who are not,
Yeah. So
aware of what you mean.
we build traffic signals. So as you pull up at an intersection, you got the red, yellow, and green lights and the steel signal poles and the video detection, the stuff that tells the car, the signal when there's cars in the intersection, and it triggers them to go. And then they have what's called an opticon system, which that's a system that when the emergency vehicle comes through, it turns everything red except for the direction that fire truck is going. And, there's just lots of different systems that, the average person that drives through a signalized intersection every day doesn't see or know about. But there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. Everything from fiber that interconnects all the signals together, that times and coordinates them together. There's a lot of neat, interesting stuff to it. A lot of control work.
Yeah. So that's your niche. That's
Yeah.
cool, man.
Yeah.
So you don't know this, but somebody asked me the other day, hey, when you have Jeremy on there, will you ask him if those stupid little buttons at the crosswalk that everybody beats to death are even connected to anything?
Yes, they are.
Are they?
Yes, they are. They are a momentary contact. You can hit them as fast and as long as you want. It works the very first time. Yes, it's a momentary contact, but it has to go through the different phases. So the pedestrian phases are 2, 4, 6, and 8. And then you have vehicle traffic, depending on if it's turning or going straight. And they're, 2 and 7, 4 and 8, so on and so forth. And of course, they can't just stop traffic automatically to let a pedestrian through. It's got to go through the cycle and through the phases of the way the signal is controlled before it's going to let you go. But yes, they do. They do make a call to this controller cabinet that tells them there's a pedestrian standing on which corner.
So all that thing's really doing is turning the little walk-shaped guy on, right?
Yes.
When it's your turn.
Correct.
Doesn't change traffic.
Yes. It does the countdown, and it doesn't allow traffic that could hit you to go through other than the free right turns, which should be looking out for you, but don't always. So even as a pedestrian, be careful.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, now that we got that controversy out of the way. Angela, I want to come back to you in the bug that bit you in the criminal justice world. So you went in there for an easy A and you came out of there with a life calling. So
yeah.
talk about that.
One of the things you had to do in this, it was an intro to criminal justice class, just a basic understanding. But one of the requirements for the class was you had to go on a ride along. And my ride along was on a night shift with a Boise police officer. I had never really been around police before. I mean, I'd been stopped by a few because I have a lead foot. But I went to do this ride along. We had 2 calls all night long. One of them was a domestic violence call. And at that time, I truly didn't understand the dynamics of domestic violence. And this female, after they had arrested her husband, she started fighting with the officer, and the officer's hands actually got bloody because he's got his hands on taking the guy to the car, and she's fighting and scratching. And we go back to the station, and I wasn't quite understanding what happened. And we talked through it a little bit. And then our next call was a man with a gun call. So we got to run code across Boise. And I was a civilian rider. I couldn't get out of the car, but they put the suspect in my car. And he was right behind me, and he's screaming and cussing and kicking my seat. And you have one of 2 reactions. You're either like, oh my gosh, I'm so scared, I've got to get out of here. Or I was like, they get paid to do this. And I was hooked. I mean, that adrenaline. I did not want to get out of there. I wanted to be investigating. I wanted to be talking to him. So I started taking more criminal justice classes, and I had an opportunity to do an internship with the Nampa Police Department my senior year in college. And I worked part-time with the child abuse unit and part-time with the city county narcotics unit. And when I graduated, because I had a dream of I wanted to go to work for the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration. I thought I was going to travel the country, work undercover narcotics, which is funny because I'm a native Idahoan. I'm a homebody. I don't know why I thought I was traveling the world. But when I graduated college, they thought I looked young enough to go back to high school. So I got hired by the city county narcotics unit to do a 21 Jump Street gig, if you will. They took me straight out of college, and I went undercover for 2 months in Caldwell High School, going from, being a college graduate to hanging out with people who were using drugs and selling drugs. And I did that for 2 months. And then I did about 6 months undercover work after that before I officially started with Nampa as a patrol officer.
Dang, so you were the undercover narc at the high school, huh?
I was for 2 months. Yep.
So people didn't recognize you, huh? You must.
No, and the only person in the school who knew I was a police officer was the principal. So if there was an emergency or something, he would know what was going on. Ironically, though, again, born in this area. My 8th grade English teacher from Emmett was now teaching at Caldwell High School. He knew me. He just, you know how you see somebody and it's not quite the right environment. And my biology teacher's wife was also teaching there. So it was an interesting dynamic. I did a presentation at the end of it because we didn't just want it to be about me coming in and, buying drugs and not doing anything. I actually went in and did a presentation for all of the teachers, all the staff, so they could understand how I was actually making drug deals in their classrooms. When I was talking about getting a paper, I wasn't being a good student. They just needed to be educated related to what was happening seriously in their classrooms.
It's so wild. Yeah. So there's a kind of code words for different things, huh?
Yeah, just depending. I mean, if you're talking about, like a quarter paper that you're, going to get meth or cocaine or something like that in, or yeah. And we were talking about it in government class.
That seems wild. That Jeremy, you never told me that story that you got to go be undercover in high school.
You could do a 4-hour podcast on the stuff she does. It's way more interesting than I remember when we were younger that we would we just had kids, or even before we had kids, I'd get home from work and it's kind of like, hey, how was your day? And she'd tell me all the stuff that she did, and we arrested this person and we took this person down, and I did an interview with this and we ran code and did that. And then it was like, well, how was your day? And I was like, well, I bent some pipe and pulled some wire. So, it's not quite as glamorous.
Oh my gosh. You downplay what you're doing, but yeah. I get a kick out of it because, I understand enough about construction and was in that world long enough where I kind of geek out on what you do, Jeremy. So I think it's cool, but Yeah, I understand when
Yeah,
you got action movie over here
yeah,
doing her stuff.
exactly. Yeah. It's the difference between watching a guy on the street versus watching an action movie and somebody, running code down the road 90 miles an hour and
Yeah.
sirens. So,
What did he tell you, Riley, that when he used to come and ride with me? That's actually, he told me about wanting to become a fish and game officer, which is why I had given him my phone number. We weren't dating or anything at this point. And he called and wanted to come do a ride along with me. And the very first time he rode with me, it was like the busiest day shift Sunday I'd ever had in my entire career. And he's like, "Oh, I want to do this too." But then, it's not always like that. And he's like, "We have to drive around for 4 hours. This is really boring."
I've mentioned on this podcast before, with a couple of law enforcement people I've had on here, that when I closed my construction company back in the end of 2009, a friend of mine that worked for Ada County had invited me to come down and apply at Ada County. He's like, "Hey, we have some positions open, and I think I could get you an interview anyways." And I weighed that for about 10 minutes before I realized I was not the guy for the job. Because I'd been on some ride-alongs, and there was a couple things that really stood out to me. One was the ridiculous amount of paperwork that had to go on, and I knew I would hate that.
yeah.
And it's a big part of the job.
Yep.
And then two was in the few ride-alongs I did, the amount of just people that I could not understand. And I didn't have that heart for them. I had this like, "You're an idiot and you should just go straight to jail." You've seen those memes, straight to jail.
Yeah.
And that's how I felt. And so I was like, "Man, I'm going to be terrible. I'd be terrible at that job." So I gave up. It was, yeah. And talk about this, because I want both of you guys' side of this thing, right? Jeremy, you're doing ride-alongs with this, and it sounds like some of those feelings I had were you were seeing some of the same thing. Like, man, you gotta sit in this car all freaking day and
Yeah.
watch this. Yeah, talk about that a little bit.
There was some really interesting things. Back when we were dating, the rules were a little more relaxed. Normally you have to sign a paper and every time you go to ride, and mine was just kind of on file because that was kind of our date night. She was working night shifts. I was working during the day. It was the only time we got to spend together is if I went and did a ride along. So a lot of times I'd go ride on Friday and Saturday with her. Obviously not during the week very often because I had to get up and go to work, but sometimes I'd go down and maybe only ride till 10, but on like Fridays and Saturdays, I'll ride all night long with her and then go home and go to bed. So yeah, there were some great, cool things, seen some stuff that, I guess it was eye-opening to the average citizen. I mean, there was, party breakups and, some shot fires type stuff, but there were some other things that were kind of scary, that kind of freaked me out a little bit. And it was, I don't know if I want you doing this stuff. But then after I watched her take care of a few situations, I realized, wow, she can handle herself just fine. Not that I didn't worry about her, but yeah, when it comes overall, I would say there's a lot of time spent filling out paperwork. There's a lot of time just driving around. Angela wasn't real big on chasing taillights, writing regular tickets to vehicles. In fact, she kind of used to say, "Well, I break that rule every once in a while. I can't write a ticket if I do that." So, you would have to be like 12 over before she's even going to touch you. So yeah, we would drive around a long time, with nothing to do. And there were some shifts you might get one call. But then there's other times you go and you don't even get out of briefing and you're already running, and we ran all night long. So, there's that little time period at night, kind of between 3 and 4 that things go pretty dead. But yeah, it was interesting. It was definitely it was an eye opener for me.
Man, I talked to a friend of mine that's a firefighter, and you talk about those days when there's all these calls that happen, just boom, 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 those busy days. He was telling me his record, and they work, 24 hours at a time, right? They'll do 2 24s. And yeah, he said his record in a 24-hour period was 30 calls.
So That's
And I thought, I'm doing the math on that. I'm like, every time I see firefighters doing anything, it's like they're standing around for so long. How do they do, more than one call an hour? But he said they learned because they were in a busy district and they'd have to do that.
yep.
And I imagine that same stuff happened with you, huh, Angela?
Yeah, well, and I worked in Nampa, so we Nampa is a busier area. We respond. We don't have calls. We're like, oh, we don't go to that kind of. I mean, they've changed it a little bit, but just Nampa's just a busy area. I laugh when you talked about the firefighters. When I started, there were no female officers. I was the only female, and when we would go out to calls with the fire guys, they had to stay outside until I went in and told them it was safe and they could come in. So I knew all the firefighters back then, and I love to I would say, okay, no, you guys stay here. I'll make sure you're safe and you can come in a minute. I'll let you know.
That is hilarious. So,
Yeah.
yeah, talk about that a little bit because I think that's people always view firefighters like all they're doing is fighting fire, right? But there was other stuff going on that they would respond to behind you guys.
Absolutely. And sometimes their calls would turn into our need. One of my homicide cases came in as a medical call, and they were very key on this case with this 3-year-old before we even get called out as law enforcement. So they get called, actually, more of their calls are medical calls, responding to somebody who's got a possible heart attack, responding to a car crash because of possible injury and treating the medical out there, as opposed to actually fighting a fire. There a lot of medical calls they go to.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I heard a percentage one time, but it's the vast majority of what they do is medical stuff, right?
Yes.
Um, Jeremy, you had mentioned having concerns about Angela on the job and feeling as a spouse, man, I don't know if I want you doing some of this dangerous stuff, man.
Yeah.
Can you fill in a little bit of that?
Yeah. Obviously when, once we were married, and especially when we had kids, she was on call a lot. Once we got married, she kind of got off the patrol thing, but she was in detectives, crimes against people, section of the police department. It was really, it was difficult because she got called out a lot. In fact, it almost got to the point when she would get phone calls in the middle of the night, which she would always get phone calls in the middle of the night. Sometimes I wouldn't even hear them because I was so used to. In fact, I wouldn't know that a phone call came in until she was literally, I'd walk in the bathroom talking to somebody, or I'd wake up and she wasn't there and she was in the craft room talking to somebody, about a case and what they should do and whether or not she had to go in, and which most of the time she did go in. Angela is very dedicated when it comes to victims, situations. She wants it handled correctly. So she would 90% of the time go in. Yeah, there are times that I think I was nervous over the situations because obviously she's dealing with the worst of the worst in society. She would talk about her cases, and sometimes I had to say, honey, I don't want to hear about that, because it kind of got to my psyche a little bit. When you're talking about a little kid being mistreated and abused, we don't like to think about those things in society. And she's seeing that every day, and it kind of got to the point where I had to say, I can't hear about all this stuff all the time. There's got to be someplace else that you can go to talk about this. I don't mind talking to you about having a hard day. I just don't want all the details, because it's really tough. Police officers deal with some really, really bad people in this world, in bad situations. And so I don't think there was a little time that I was worried about her getting hurt, but after I watched her, being on call, I don't think I really worried about it as much, other than when she did get the knife pulled on her, the one time. And that kind of freaked her out too. And it was before we had kids, and she seriously thought about maybe dropping, out of being a police officer, which we sat down and talked a lot about it, and we kind of got that all figured out that, hey, this is your passion, this is your call. This is what you were born to do. You can't let being scared pull you away from what you're being called to do. So yeah, that's kind of, there are a lot of interruptions in life. When it came to kids, we very seldom, if we did go out, we always took separate vehicles, and mainly because you never knew when she was going to get called out. And even though it was set up that they would be on call for a week at a time, supposed to be every 4 weeks or 6 weeks. That was never the case with Angela, just because of the position she held and where she was in detectives. She was the highest, I don't want to say ranked, but probably had the most, well, I know had the most skill set in that division at that time when our kids were little. And it was super difficult to go do anything without her being called out. So it was always, two vehicles. I know multiple times we'd go to dinner and she'd get called out. I'd have to bring dinner home, bring the kids home, hockey games, baseball games, whatever it may be. It happened a lot, and it I wouldn't say it bothered me a ton. There were certain times I think it bothered me, but it's part of the job. You just kind of go, okay, yeah. I mean, this is what I signed up for. So
We had a couple on here, Rich and Jen Jones, and they were both police officers in San Francisco's Tenderloin district, and their story's fascinating. But they talked a lot about the same thing. And they just all those on call. One of them's getting called consistently, and so they would do the same stuff. They had two vehicles everywhere, and life was interrupted on a regular basis. And,
yeah.
Angela, talk about this, because you mentioned you were the only female for a while on the it was Nampa Police Force, right? I want you to talk about the realistic, because you get a certain amount of hands-on training, right? And you have to go hands-on with people, oftentimes larger than you. You're not a very, very big lady.
I think I'm 6 foot.
Yeah. But you're not. But talk about the precautions, right? Because there's some real physical limits there, right? And I want to hear your side of that and kind of what that looked like and what things you would do to keep yourself safe out there.
So I will be honest. So Nampa, well, when I first started, when I was telling you about the city county narcotics unit, I had no training. I hadn't been through a police academy. I had nothing when they sent me undercover, which is crazy when I think about what a liability that was. But when I got hired, Nampa is very progressive with their training, with our, quarterly trainings, with our arrest take speech training, with our handcuffing training. You get more of that in the academy, but Nampa does above and beyond on that, right? So we, whether it's ground fighting, and I would come home to Jeremy, okay, this is what I learned today. Okay, try and grab me.
Or told me he almost had to call someone else to get you off him sometimes.
Yeah. Yes.
It was that, but one of the things that I say was most beneficial to me is communication is very effective in calming people down. I actually became a hostage negotiator for our department for 10 years because I'm really, really good at talking to people and calming them down. I tell people, for the most part in my career, I could talk myself into and out of every situation I got myself into. I think being a female, there are still people who, like they would be cussing and yelling, and then they would, oh, pardon me, ma'am, to me. And I carried myself as a female. I didn't try to pretend like I was one of the guys. I never fell into that. I'm going to act like one of the guys, or I'm going to be one of the guys. I'm just going to be me, and I'm going to communicate with them that way. I had a defense attorney who one time said he hated getting clients that had me as their cop because people thought I was their mom or their counselor, and they, would talk to me and work with me and cooperate with me. And in my entire career, what I would consider real physical fights, probably less than 10 in my entire 27-year career.
Yeah, I love what you said about the verbal part, right? The conversational part, because I mean, we've all seen the videos of, cops gone rogue when they they lose their cool, right?
Yes.
And the only reason they made YouTube is because there's these few instances when that happens.
Yes.
But that verbal de-escalation, I think, is such a big deal.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I've ever told you this story, but one of the youth group meetings at church, they asked me to go teach self-defense. They wanted self-defense because they know I'm a jiu-jitsu guy, right? Well, it's all these 12, 13-year-old girls in the group we're in. It was all the little girls, and I think their vision for me was I was going to teach them how to be Navy SEALs in an hour-long class, right? And I went in there, and my biggest recommendation to these young ladies was not, hey, I'm going to teach you how to fight. I taught them a couple ways to break people's grips and run away and kind of things, but it was I gave them this tip. I said, if you will avoid doing stupid things at stupid times with stupid people in stupid places, you're going to avoid 99% of the problems in life.
Yeah.
So pick your friends wisely. Go to bed at 10 o'clock because nothing good happens after that.
Exactly.
It's these real practical, like, here's how you avoid almost all of it. And you want a handgun for the rest. So will you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, you know what's funny? I still get asked to do self-defense classes. I just did one probably 2 months ago out at Nampa Christian. They bring these group of girls together and have me come and talk to them. And so I always tell them, this is probably not going to be what you thought it was going to be. I'm not going to teach you 60 different moves. I'm not going to teach you how to get out of everything you're possibly going to get into, because there's no way to predict that. And trauma is going to impact your brain. Your prefrontal lobe is going to go offline. And I tell them a little basics about that, but I talk about mental preparedness and just your awareness of your environment. So one of the very first things I have them do is walk. I have one of them get up and walk by me. And I look at her the whole time. And then I turn around and I follow her and I smile at her. And it makes her very uncomfortable. And they almost will always drop their heads when they're walking by. And I said, you need to look up at people. People need to know you see them, and they need to know you see them if they're turning around watching you. And you need to walk like you're 6 foot. And that's what I tell people all the time. And, I jokingly say in class, my mom raised me to believe I was 6 foot. Took forever to figure I was only 5'9". Not really.
You're not 5'9".
But I carry myself that way, and I make eye contact with you, and I will engage you. I won't stand with my back to you necessarily in an elevator. I might make you uncomfortable, but I'm going to turn around and you're going to see me. And that's one of the things that I teach them. And I also teach them about using their voices. I actually make them stand up and yell no, and they're like, this feels so weird, we don't do this. And I make them yell stop, and it's this stop, and I'm like, I'm not convinced you want me to stop anything. If they can't hear you downstairs in the weight room, you're not yelling loud enough. And because especially females are not taught to do that kind of stuff, right? They're taught to be timid and it's just interesting. So, and I do teach them a few basic things. I teach them, like if somebody's trying to grab hold of them, how to break holds. I teach them, what it looked like to have a solid punch. Don't worry about your little pretty fingernails, but how to do. And Michaela would tell you that at night, when I'd come up to her bedroom and do a prayer with her, she said, and then my mom would make me block, punch, kick.
Awesome.
Yeah,
I
we
love
did
it.
learn to do that.
No, something you mentioned there about just that timidness and sometimes politeness, right? We don't want to sit and have direct eye contact with somebody necessarily because it's awkward. And I saw a video just yesterday or last night, something where it was this lady in one of those 24-hour like fitness facilities. And it was like 2 a.m. and some guy come knocking on the door, and she thought he was another member. And she was the only person in the whole gym. Well, she let this guy in the door and he attacked her, which would have never happened if she would have just not tried to be polite and open that door.
Absolutely.
If he had a membership card, he would have had his own.
I worked one of those cases at a 24-hour fitness place, and it was a member, but that late night, people just let their guards down and
Yeah, we always want to be polite, but again, if he had a membership, he could have just come in the door himself. But
one of the things I talk about in my trauma informed training is I talk about how when we deal with trauma, high stress, and high fear, we fall back on habits and survival reflexes that we've developed over our lifetime. And we develop self-protection habits that are polite. I with my class, I'll say, when you were in first grade, how were you taught to deal with aggressive people? How were you taught to deal with a bully? Tell the teacher, oh, they might like you, kill them with kindness, ignore them, right? Well, we learn this all through our life, and it becomes a habit that your brain will pull to when you are in trauma, when you are in high stress and high fear. And so we see, oh, please stop, please don't do that. I don't want, we see all these polite responses. We don't see people turn around and yelling at people and being aggressive and don't and stop. Those aren't our habits that we develop.
Yeah. Yeah. The first time you probably had those girls yell, stop, that it's almost stage fright happens, right? It's just so foreign.
And they just kind of laugh and giggle, and I tell them all the time, if you're not willing to practice these kinds of things, they're not going to be there for you, because you have to create a habit. So even when I teach self-defense, I tell them, I'm not going to teach you all these moves. I'm going to teach you a few, but I want you to practice them, because if you don't practice it, and it does not become a habit. So I tell people, if you're going to carry mace, if you're going to carry these things, you have to practice with them. I don't tell people to carry guns, because they don't go out and practice with them, and they're more likely to get hurt with that gun than they are to hurt somebody else. Same with, if you don't practice using your mace or your pepper spray, if you don't practice all these things they put on keychains, they're just a waste.
Absolutely. Jeremy, I've got a question, man. And you can answer this or not, but was there ever times when you just, the husband part of you, some criminal did something mean to your wife, when you just want to go find that guy and beat the crap out of him?
There was actually an incident where it was when the police department was at its old location, and down below the police department, they had holding cells down there, so they still took criminals that were being arrested over to Canyon County Jail, but they had holding cells down below in the old place. And they had arrested an individual, a younger man, and he was handcuffed to the outside of one of the holding cells, and I was downstairs, and Angela and I had actually just came in, and we went downstairs, and this individual proceeded to call my wife some very, very filthy names. And I lost it. I was walking down the hallway down to go correct this individual with my fist. And I was stopped by another police officer that was on her team.
Sergeant.
Yeah. Actually, yeah, her sergeant stopped me, and pulled me back, and then pulled me into his office. Actually, no, it was the lieutenant that pulled me into his office. And everybody's like, oh, you're in trouble. You're probably never going to be able to ride again, all this stuff. And I'm scared. I'm like, oh, I screwed up here. So, because I proceed to call him a few things and tell him, I was coming to get him. He pulls me into his office, and I was there with the lieutenant and the sergeant. And after the door closed, he goes, Jeremy, and I'm waiting for it. And he goes, we feel the same exact way you are feeling right now, because we care about Angela. She's like our daughter. She's like our sister, all these things. And we don't like it when that happens either, but we have to control our feelings. I understand exactly the way you feel, and I would love to go down there and whip that kid's butt too, but we can't do that. So I need you to promise me that you're going to take control of your feelings, and that this is just part of the job, and you need to let it go. And I promised them that, and they didn't kick me out, and everything was good. But everybody thought I was going to get reamed by the lieutenant and the sergeant, but they were actually really cool with me about it. So, but yeah, there are definitely some times that I wanted to. I was the guy, That's why I think a lot of guys can't be in that police officer situation, because even if it happened to Angela, or if what they were doing to a kid, the first thing we want to do is let's just put this person out of everybody's misery. Let's just get rid of him. And obviously we can't do that. That's not the way things are handled. It's not the law. So,
It's not the last, not, yeah,
they don't allow
it's
us.
not. So, Angela, that was the only time in all the years you did police work that you got called names, right?
Well, only I wish.
No, there was many other times when I was with her that happened. I just understood that it's part of the job. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's what I'm getting at, and I say that's pretty sarcastically, but that is part of the job, right? And I want to hear your take on that, Angela.
So, you were commenting on just some of the people you had, listened to some of the people they had dealt with. As Jeremy alluded, we deal with the worst of the worst in society, but we also deal with some pretty incredible human beings that are just in really, really unfortunate situations. And to be able to walk alongside any of them, the ones who are yelling and cussing. I mean, when I was younger, the name calling, especially one particular name that they would call me, was not. I did not like that name, and so when I was younger, I reacted to that stuff more. And then, as I matured, I'm like, you know, I don't care what they call me. I'm here to do a job, and they don't like somebody holding them accountable for their behavior, and that's my job. So, and for the most part, yes, they would yell and they would cuss at me, but I still feel like most people, because I treated people with respect, they treated me with respect, no matter what they were doing. I mean, I had a guy that I arrested who was trying to break into an ATM, ask me to marry him. I mean, I had a guy that I arrested for murder, and I spent 12 hours with him driving to crime scenes, finding the murder weapon, the burn site. And when I took him to jail, he asked me if he could send me Christmas cards. I was testifying in court one time, and I was sitting second chair to the prosecutor. So during voir dire, where they're selecting the jury, I'm there, and they're saying, well, does anybody know prosecutor so and so? Does anybody know Detective Weekes? And this guy raises his hand. How do you know Detective Weekes? She arrested me for domestic violence. And I'm like, don't leave on the jury. And he came up later and he said, I really wished you guys had picked me. I know how you treated me. I know how respectful you, and I know what I did wrong. And you held me accountable, but you treated me with respect. He said, I know you did this in this case. And I'm like, okay, put it back on the jury.
So that's an interesting thing, right? Because you had talked about before when I asked you, what are ways to de-escalate, and you were talking about the verbal being the biggest part of it, and there's some tact in there, but there's some skill to that, right? To having these conversations in a way that gives that person enough dignity to where you're not just demeaning them, and I imagine that goes a long way in that de-escalation. Business owners, I want to talk to you for a second. Do you have a retail space inside your location? If so, I want you to think about something. Your customers are buying electrolytes. You know that, right? The problem is they're not buying them from you. Well, Salty Electrolytes can help fix that with their wholesale program. They can bring these sales to you in-house so that your customers get the electrolytes they love from the company they love, you. All you have to do is head over to goearnyoursalt.com and scroll to the bottom of the page and click Apply for Wholesale. Do it now before you forget. I know your type, I'm one of you. Once again, that's goearnyoursalt.com. The link is at the bottom of the homepage. There will also be a link in the description on this video. And now, my friends, go earn your salt.
Absolutely, it does. And there were times where I wanted somebody to learn a lesson. Didn't want them, like when I was dealing with shoplifters or especially juveniles, like I wanted them to go, I never want to experience this again, right? I wanted to create a little bit of fear with them. Like with shoplifters, I used to do this thing where, especially with kiddos, I would say, I would ask them what their favorite things were in their bedroom. And, they'd talk about their video games or what their CD players or whatever. And I said, okay, well, we're going back over to your house and I'm taking those things. And they're like, you can't take those things from me. And I said, why can't I? You think you can walk in here and take things? And then, they'd be bawling. And then I'm like, okay, I got them. They're never going to do this again. But, when you're dealing with other, that was my kind of wanting to teach them a lesson so they didn't get back in trouble, versus the ones that were aggressive or, that had weapons, or, that you just had to deal with it differently.
Yeah, I imagine different circumstances definitely require different tact, right?
Yeah.
Tactics, I should say. Talk about this. You go from the police career and you move into the domestic violence. I think is probably the category you'd put it in, right? Um, what took you that direction?
So it actually, so I worked a lot of when I was on patrol, because I was the only female. They inherently thought I understood domestic violence and sexual assault cases, and I didn't. But they used to want to send me to all of them, and I didn't understand what was going on in a lot of those situations. I didn't understand the dynamics of power and control in those situations. But the more I got involved in them, the more I saw the societal impact those crimes truly had on our entire community, that it wasn't just another call, it wasn't just another vandalism. And my first homicide case was a 4-month-old little girl whose dad had held her face down in a stack of pillows until she quit breathing, or till she quit crying, is what he told me. And he had a history of abusing his own wife, and nobody had ever reported that to the police. And within 5 months, I was working a case of another little girl who her babysitter shook her violently, on 2 separate occasions, and gave her a subdural and a acute or acute and chronic subdural hematoma, and it left her blind and paralyzed. She's actually still alive. I still get video clips from her mom, and when she's doing aquatic therapy and things like that. And within 2 weeks after that, I was working another case, and that woman also had a history of domestic violence, lighting her own kids' clothes on fire. And then 2 weeks later, I was working a case with another 3-year-old little girl, actually just 2 blocks from the Family Justice Center where we're currently located. And she died from blunt force trauma. That's the medical call I was telling you about. The medic fire got called out first, and they realized something was wrong. And this man was violating a no contact order. He had 68 contacts with the Nampa Police Department. The majority of them were civil protection order violations, domestic violence, and he murdered her. So these little girls, within a 5-month period in my career, made me realize we needed to do something different. I needed to educate myself. I needed to educate my department, my community. I needed to change the outcome, because this should not be the story for anybody. And I didn't want any of their lives to be in vain.
Yeah. It's funny because you just share a couple of those things right there. And Jeremy, you'd mentioned earlier that there was a point when you were kind of like, I don't want to hear details on this stuff, right?
Yep.
A couple of my jujitsu friends down there that they fight fires, and every once in a while they'll give me a little too much detail, and I'm like, wow, man, I didn't realize what you guys dealt with. One of them here recently was a human trafficking situation where the police were closing in on these guys, and they knew it. So they took these 3 teenage girls, 11 to 13-year-olds, so tween-age girls, right? Chained them up in the basement of a house, put propane tanks all around them, and lit the house on fire. And the fire, Sam, this friend of mine, had to go. He was on 2 of those calls, 2 consecutive days, where these guys did that twice. And the first one, 2 of the girls lived, but were burned pretty badly. And the second one, neither of them. There was 2 girls. But these guys, just some of it's wild that even exists out there, but to have to see it and smell it, and, just that grieving that they go through, it blows my mind. They'll come into the jiu-jitsu mats and they're in tears, and just going, this is what I dealt with this last week. Right. So Jeremy, I want to hear from you when trauma situations came up. What did that mean for the family? I mean, because that's got to affect Angela on a psychological level. There's got to be some time there of just dealing with that. What did that look like to the rest of the family?
I Angela hit it pretty well. I know it wasn't so much. I think it was hiding it from the family, but she was definitely talking with people at the police department. Obviously, they have a psychologist and stuff like that at the police department, and I know she avoided that kind of stuff for a while. But eventually, she would go talk to individuals because I mean, I didn't mean to push her away by don't talk to me about the trauma, but it was also, hey, I don't want the trauma to embed on me also. So we got to figure out how we can take care of this, and she did. I mean, obviously, police officers I've been around a lot. We've had a lot of friends through the Nampa Police Department, swimming, barbecues, so on and so forth. um, Police officers just have a different sense of humor about some things, and sometimes they speak about things that you're like, what? It's like they kind of talk about it nonchalantly, or they make a joke about something, and it's just how they deal with it. So the police community is pretty tight niche, and a lot of friends and all that stuff. So she had a lot of support that way. She had the support from our family as far as she knows she was loved. She had someplace safe to come home to. Things were going to get taken care of. House was clean, meals were cooked, kids got to daycare, kids got to school. She knew all that stuff was being taken care of, so she didn't have to worry about that stuff. Even though I'm working a full-time job too, she knew when she got called out for, it wasn't just like a night that she'd be called out. A lot of the times, once she got into a heavy case, especially if it was a homicide or a really bad domestic violence or a rape, that call could go on for days. And sometimes she would work 16, 18, 20-hour days, come home, catch a nap, boom, she's gone again. So there's a lot of stuff that had to be taken care of at home. Um, and we were happy to do it. When the kids were little, they learned how to pick up. They learned how to get things. We kept the house ready for when mom got home. Um, but as far as I could only maybe think of a couple times that maybe that I can think of that kind of affected her. I remember the first autopsy she went to with a little kid that was about the same age that McKaylee was, and I know that affected her because of the age of the child. And we had a kid that same age, so that one affected her a little bit, or quite a bit. And she was able to get some help through that. And then I know the time the guy pulled the knife, and she had every right to have ended that person's life. Chose not to, and thank God he didn't do anything, and didn't take anything further. But that was a very scary moment, and we discussed quite a bit about that one. But overall, the police community and what they have at the Nampa Police Department, as far as mentally taking care of their officers, they do a pretty good job of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm asking these questions, you guys, because I'm trying to kind of build this picture, right? Because I don't think people understand. Like I said, they see a YouTube video where a cop screws up, but they don't see what 20, did you say 27 years in the police force? Is that what you said? That accumulation of events and things, and, gosh, man, give some grace. A cop's going to have a bad day every once in a while, right? And they're, one of the things you mentioned, Jeremy, was the dark humor, right?
Yeah.
And if you're around people in any situation that has to do with trauma, the dark humor's there for sure. Yeah. I've talked with soldiers. I've talked with, again, EMS people, police officers. Even people just in a stressful job. The construction workers, right?
Yeah.
Dark humor's there, and but it is a coping mechanism. And can you talk about how that helped you guys cope?
So, I think it can actually kind of go both ways. I think the humor, going out and seeing some of the suicide scenes or accident scenes that we've seen, and then talking about, going out and grabbing spaghetti. I mean, those kind, because we were trying to like separate, we use it kind of to separate and move on from things. But I think sometimes when people are doing it too much, the very first time the department forced me into counseling, the lady told me I had a great sense of humor and that my sense of humor was a great coping skill. And I'm like, yep, we signed this paper. I mean, I'm like, you have no clue what I'm doing. You literally have no idea. And they made me go after those 3 cases that I had just told you about because they were in just a short period of time. And I had another time where I was forced into counseling because of the 3 other really bad cases that happened within a 1 week period. And the department forced me into counseling that time. And she was a crime scene fanatic. Like she was like, and what did you see? And what was happening? And I'm like, and will you sign this paper? Back when I first started, the reliance on mental health and the understanding of vicarious trauma was not strong. And I did not want to appear. I mean, the guys already, when I started, some of them didn't want to come to calls with me. They were afraid I was going to run and cry. I don't know what they thought I was going to do. One of them wouldn't let me search buildings with him because he would make me stand on the outside of the building and wouldn't let me come in because I was going to get hurt or something. So I didn't want them to see me as weak. I didn't want them to see me as not being able to handle my job. But when I finally did so we don't have a psychologist in the police department, but we have a list of resources that are available to us. And when I found somebody who understood first responders, I've seen her off and on for over 20 years. She was tremendous in helping me with being able to deal with because this was a choice because it's what God asked me to do with my life. I chose to work persons crimes the majority of my career. So child abuse, child death investigations, sexual assault, domestic, human trafficking, homicides, gang related cases. That was what I did the majority of my career. So I literally saw the worst of the worst evil in the world. Um, I tell people that the general public could not handle knowing what really happens in their community.
That okay. That is a good point, right? Because you had mentioned earlier in the episode that you're with people on their worst day, right? And that's majority of what emergency or first responders deal with. It's people's worst day. I as a civilian, I've been in a couple fender benders, right? And they suck. Nothing about that's fun. No one died in those accidents. There was no fatalities. I saw one time out on a freeway where a car was flipping through the air, and I was wondering how many bodies I was going to find when I went to try to help. The guy was mostly okay, had a bad concussion and a cut on, and tore his ear most of the way off, and a broken arm, but it wasn't sticking out of the skin. So there wasn't really a lot of visible trauma there. But that was this one event in my almost 50 years of life, but you guys are dealing with that on a regular basis. And I can't stress enough to people that when you get pulled over in traffic and you've got this officer that's, being a little grumpy with you, you don't know what he just came from, right?
Yeah. Yep. So I actually had one of my coworkers who actually you would know who she is if I mentioned her by name because she went to the church with us. She came up to me one day and pardon the language, she said, Angela, why are all cops assholes? And I'm like, did you just call me an asshole? And I said, tell me why are I saying that? She said, I just got stopped on this traffic stop and he came up to the window and he's like, license, restoration, and insurance. And then he just went back to his car. And I'm like, okay. And
Yeah, because you think that was the only thing he's done this whole month, right?
and what I said to her is, I said, do you know if he pulled a dead baby out of the canal before you decided to speed? Do you know if he just had somebody threaten to take his life or watch somebody jump off of commit suicide in front of him? You have the public has no idea of what we see. It's not like TV, right? They don't understand that, but we are expected to be professional, to be friendly. Unless you want us to be mean to somebody, then you want us to be jerks to them. Why are they talking nice to that guy that stole from me? They want us to be ministers, they want us to be social workers, they want us to be WWE wrestlers. Take it. They want us to be all these things but have no emotion regarding any of it.
Yeah, absolutely amazing to me that that big picture thing, right? Because I could imagine after people lie to you consistently for years and years and years, and then all of a sudden you find yourself in this place where you doubt when someone's actually telling you the truth. That seems warranted to me, and that's part of the reason. Clear back when I was saying I didn't go apply for the Ada County was because I knew I could not deal with that well. If people were lying to me on a consistent basis, I wouldn't be able to just be polite anyways, right?
One of my phrases I would use all the time. So I loved doing suspect interrogations. Some people in the department used to call me the closer because I could get people to talk to me about everything. It didn't matter if they killed a kid, if they were a serial rapist, if they were a murderer. I mean, people talked to me about all sorts of things. And I used to say, because everybody lies to me, right? And so I would say, when I come back into my interrogation, I said, here's the deal. I know you lied to me about all of this, right? And I'm telling you now that I know you were lying to me. So now I don't expect you're going to keep lying to me. Let's move forward with where we're going to go from here. I use that line all the time. And Jeremy will tell you how much I actually hate being lied to. It's like the one of the biggest, but I got lied to all the time in my job. But I also was really good at getting people to talk about that and to get through that. And I held a lot of people accountable for the choices they made to do the damage they did in our community.
So you
That does
called them out, but you found a way to phrase that also left some dignity in there, right?
Let,
I
let, let them
expect
think
from
win.
now on you're going to do the honorable thing and tell me the truth.
Yeah. Yep. Let them think that they've got a little win in there, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Jeremy,
yeah.
did she use some of these psychological tactics on you at home?
Actually just going to tell you that it would come over. I actually remember telling Angela multiple times when we were in discussions or an argument or whatever is I am not a suspect. Do not interrogate me. Because it did happen. And I could see it the minute it clicked when we went from conversation to her interrogating me. I was like, no, we're not going to do this. I'm not a suspect. I'm not a criminal. Don't do this. So, yeah, it definitely carried over, but you could see the switch on her when she did it. So I could catch it pretty quick.
Jeremy, did you water all the plants?
Yeah. Which,
Now, I know you're lying to me about this one because it's shriveled up,
That's
but I'm
right.
expecting from here out you're going to tell me the truth.
yeah.
He used to always tell me also, Angela, not everybody is a child molester.
Yeah.
And Angela, not everybody uses meth. And I'm like, you don't know that. We look at the world differently. And I still do. I still, you'll notice, like when I'm talking to somebody, and I'll still do it. Like if Jeremy and I are talking and it's, there's a disagreement or something, I start blading myself. My posture changes. My hands come up. Like all of these like reflexes that I've had in defensive situations, I still do it. I've done it at the church because I have approached people at the church because of things I was watching going on at this church and our previous church. Because some of those things you just can't turn it off.
Yeah. Yeah. So talk about this. I generally will ask this question to first responders, but especially law enforcement. What do you do to keep yourself from becoming callous that way and not looking at everyone as a child molester, right?
So I will tell you, kind of back to what Jeremy was talking about. I was incredibly blessed in my home life to have stuff that was outside of this career, right? Jeremy wasn't in law enforcement. None of our family is in law enforcement. So often law enforcement think that they have to marry each other, that they can't hang out with anybody and then they see the world, everything in the world is against them. So I think that God truly blessed me with my marriage and with our kids and with our family support that we have that kept some of that in balance. I mean, yes, do I still think things and do I jump to conclusions? But I've got a lot of practice in those conclusions I jump to. But I still I left this career not feeling like I'm a calloused individual. I'm actually still a very high hope individual. And I still believe that there's a lot of good in the world. And I've seen a lot of good in the world, even though I've also seen more evil than most humans will ever see in a lifetime.
Did you have to be strategic about that and keeping that callousness from building up?
Yeah, and there were things I had to be strategic about. Like I referred to it as I had a light switch. If I'm at work and I'm doing my work, my light switch is on. But when I was asked to do things that were not my work, I remember my first homicide case. The little girl's dad was a suspect, and he wasn't supposed to come to the funeral. So they made my partner and I attend her funeral and to do surveillance to make sure he's not there. And that my light switch went off. I'm standing out there with my gun on, listening to her grandpa talk, and I'm just bawling, right? I also, one of my buddies was shot in the line of duty 5 times, and I was the officer assigned to him at the hospital. And I was in the OR with him. I was in CAT scan with him. I watched him have open heart surgery, which is not part of my job, and my light switch went off. And that kind of stuff, because they asked me to pray over him before he went up to surgery. I could be very professional and very not that I wasn't emotional, but like if I knew I was doing my work. I had another case with, it was actually our neighbor's little boy who had passed away in a car ride into town, and my detective that I was training, we get called out to it. But I personally know these people, but I still have my light switch on, and we get in there and I'm showing him and my patrol officer what we need to do with this baby, and they're doing, oh my gosh, he's the same age as my son, and I'm like, we don't do that here. That's not what this is about. We're doing an investigation. This is evidence. So there were times that people are like, wow, she's really cold, but I can do my job really, really well. But learning to find a place where you can cry in the shower, or hug somebody later on, to process that. Because like when I teach my vicarious trauma classes, I said there are just times we have to pull up our big boy pants and do the job, right? Because the public needs us to do that, but we still have to take care of ourselves and figure out how to do that.
Yeah. That seems like such a challenge, but I don't know. I think we've all experienced those situations that in the moment we step up to the challenge, but later you look at it and it's like, man, there's tears, right?
Yeah.
I've talked to our guys, Jeremy, you know this because you've been there for the conversations in a small group when I talk about our bankruptcy back in 2009, right? And when I went through it, it was hard, but we went through it, it was this thing. But if I get talking about it still today, oh, it tears me up.
Yeah. And I'll do that with cases from 10 or 20 years ago, that if you had met me when I was working that case, you would have had no idea. But I'll give you an example. I don't know if I can do it without crying. I retired right in the middle of COVID, right? But they still let us have a thing at the Civic Center, which was kind of crazy. But I knew a lot of people, so they let the retirement be at the Civic Center. And at the end of it, there are people who are just lined up, coming up to hug me and just thank me. And I turned, and that little girl I was telling you about that was murdered by the man right down the road from us, her dad was standing there, and he just started bawling. And that case was it back in 2001, 2001. And he started bawling, and I looked, and I lost it, right? It took me right back to, I mean, I didn't bawl when I worked that case. I didn't bawl when I went to her autopsy. I didn't bawl when I talked to the family and, about what had happened. And when that case went to trial, I had to identify her, her from a picture. Didn't cry at any of that. But, there are times that it's safer to let those emotions out.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Okay. I want to move on to your stage of life now, right? Um, the Family Justice Center in Nampa. Okay. That was, if I, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was partly your brainchild, wasn't it?
It was my brainchild. It's my baby. I actually was teaching for it was actually right after those 3 cases I just told you about. I was the lead instructor for the Idaho State Police Academy on domestic violence, and they offered to send me to a conference in San Diego, California. And I'm like, I've never been to San Diego. Sure, send me. I didn't know what I was going to. And at the time, it was called the Domestic Violence, Sexual Assault, and I don't remember, something conference. And they had in October of that year. So the training was in April. In October or in April of that year, when I went down there, they had just opened the first family justice center in the country. Casey Gwynn and Gail Strock had opened that. And part of the conference was we got to tour that. And I went back to my hotel room, went to sleep, and God woke me up in a hotel room and did not let me go back to sleep until I had 8 pages of a strategic plan on how we were going to do this in Nampa, Idaho. I seriously, he did not. I was writing it. And Jeremy can also tell you that I also, God talks to me in my sleep, because some people say it's the only time I slow down enough to hear him.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, Jeremy talks about that. Yeah.
I wake up a lot and dictate in my phone or have to write notes down. But I was awake for probably 3 hours just writing everything down. And then I went back to sleep and slept like a baby. And I came back and I started meeting with people and to see if they thought I was crazy. And I wrote a community develop. Well, actually, I brought together a community team, is what I did. I invited the mayor and city council members and prosecutors and cops and social workers, all the people I'd already been working with. And I did a in her shoes simulation with them, which is a simulation that lets people kind of understand all of the places that we send survivors to get help, all outside of, the police department, outside of Nampa, even sometimes outside of our state. It's crazy. And they were frustrated, and we were doing that within a building, right? It wasn't even nearly what we asked survivors to do. And I had people telling me that night, if you build, basically Field of Dreams, if you build this, we will put people in your facility. And one of the city councilmen came up to me, or one of the ladies working for the city came up and told me about a community development block grant. I did not know how to write grants, but this is what I was supposed to be doing. So I wrote a community development block grant, and I went before city council and I told them what I wanted to do. And they gave me $375,000. I didn't even have a building. And they said, we have a building downtown Nampa. The city owns it. Go look at it. If it works for you, you can have it for free. And here you can have this part of the money to remodel it. And I went down there and there was a church in there. A couple of senators had their offices in there, just different stuff. And everybody was so supportive of what I was talking about. Everybody moved out. And then right around that time, President Bush set aside $20 million to fund 15 pilot projects. Casey Gwynn, who had started the San Diego model, went and spoke to President Bush and got his investment in that. And there were like 400 communities that applied for this money, and well, that said they were going to apply. And I think there were about 130 of us who actually applied. And the Department of Justice actually came out to Nampa. They went to all these communities to see if we really had things in place that we said we had in place. And I knew we had them in place. I knew who my partners were. We just weren't working together in the same building. And they came out, and I was grocery shopping one day, and I got a call from the chief who said, you got almost $1 million. We got picked as one of the pilot projects. And so we worked for 2 years before we opened our doors in 2005. And in November this last year, we celebrated 20 years of being open outside San Diego. We're the longest running family justice center in the country, but they exist in 150 locations in our country now and 150 internationally. And we still lead the movement. I actually was just on another call nationally last week talking about child protection issues and domestic violence issues as a nationally recognized subject matter expert because of what we do in Nampa, Idaho.
So in summary, what exactly does Family Justice Center do?
So the Family Justice Center provides wraparound co-located services to domestic violence, child abuse, sexual assault, elder abuse, human trafficking, and stalking victims. So instead of having to go to the police department, having to go to the court to get a protection order, having to go to the hospital to get a medical exam on a sexual assault or a child abuse case, instead of having to go see a legal aid attorney, we house all of those partners in one location in a trauma-informed, victim-centered environment. And even in that, you don't go from office to office. There are victim rooms up front, or we call them clients because we believe that's a more empowering term. And they get to choose who they see in that facility, and we go to them in that building. We can offer everything from free. Everything we do is free, but we can offer spiritual support. We have chaplains who work with us. We can offer legal aid support. We can offer medical, law enforcement, case management. If they need help with housing, gas vouchers, clothing, the list goes on and on and on. And we are just continuing to evolve in what we can continue to provide for our clients.
That's pretty awesome. This has you said your brainchild, right? And you have taken this thing now. You're retired from the police force. And technically you're still retired, but I hear rumor, Jeremy, you need to speak to this, that retirement is in quotes, right?
Yeah.
Talk about what that looks like at home now. Now that Angela's retired.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Jeremy, we tell them about retirement.
Yeah, Angela's not really retired. She probably works more than she did when she was working. She's just, I think what it is she's retired from the police department and now she's doing what she really loves to do. So that's why she doesn't consider it work, because she's doing what she loves to do. So she's down at the Family Justice Center. She is down there volunteering 3-4 days a week sometimes, most at least 3 days a week. She sits on the board for the foundation. She's a foundation president, and then on top of that, because the Family Justice Center is popular and there's lots of people and places that want that. She travels and she helps other communities that want to set up other Family Justice Centers in their area. I know recently I actually went up to a gala event or fundraiser up in Salmon. Salmon's trying to open one up. I know Bozeman, Montana. So there's some that are going in close. And then she also does a lot of traveling because she trains for the National Chief of Police Association. I know she does. They've got some grants that were written for training for the state of Idaho. So she travels around all of the police departments here in the state of Idaho and helps train in vicarious trauma and domestic violence best practices in investigations for child abuse and rapes and all that other stuff that they do. She travels with another gal here, Alicia Bowles, she's an amazing human too.
We switch gears a little bit. Okay.
Yeah.
You guys had, I don't know which year it was, and you can speak to this, but at some point in this journey, you had the big C, the cancer hit your world. When was that, Angela?
It was 2015. I was actually down at the rec center preparing for a physical test for the police department. We had physicals that our running push-ups and all that stuff that we had to do periodically. And I was doing push-ups, and I did 3 push-ups, and I had so much, I thought I had done something to my shoulder. I had so much pain in my shoulder. I didn't know what was going on. So I'm like, oh, I tore something. And I came home that night and realized it was something different. My grandmother had a complete mastectomy. My aunt had a complete mastectomy. I'd had benign tumors removed starting at 18. So I'd always been aware of screening, and I did a screening that night. And and Jeremy had been with me when I had one of the tumors removed. So we'd been kind of used to, that there could be something, but this one was completely different. And I recognized it that night, and I told him that, and I called the doctor the next day, and they're like, you need to come in. You need to come in now. And went in, and they did the mammogram, they did the ultrasound. They were trying to get me scheduled for a surgery really fast. I mean, when they're doing that, it's and ironically, the person who did the forensic pathologist who did the looking at my the tumor that got removed, or the sample, I had worked with for years. He, on autopsies, I'd known Dr. Cron's forever. And I left the parking lot and I said, Joe, here's the deal. I'm having surgery this day. Please don't make me wait till the weekend. And he said, you and your husband come into my office tomorrow morning. And he pulled it up on the screen, told us what it was, that I had stage 2 breast cancer, and he was sitting on the breast cancer team for Boise. And I got one of the best surgeons, Dr. Preer over there, and we started through a crazy 2.5, well, if you look at all the things, it's even been longer than that, but 2 years of a really, really crazy journey.
There's this thing that happens, right? Because cancer doesn't just affect you, right? It affects your friends and your family and sort of thing. And I remember a friend of mine, his wife had breast cancer, and she survived that, but the long-term effects on her were a big deal. But the long-term effects on him went overlooked a lot. And I'd love to hear from you, Jeremy, on what you as the spouse experienced.
Oh, you're trying to make me cry. Um,
I know I almost crying saying it, just even asking the question, because
it's I mean, I look back. I mean, hindsight's 2020, right? I look back on it. Um, I so should have probably went and talked to a counselor. There was a lot of stuff that yeah, a lot of stuff we dealt with as a family. Um, Everything from, I mean, don't get me wrong. When Angela made that phone call in the parking lot, um, a peace came about her um, that could only have been God. It was just it went from a when I got the phone call when I heard about it, when she told me, "Hey, don't come home. I need you to come straight to the hospital. I'm driving home from work and I don't know what's going on and I'm starting to freak out." And we get there and we go through the whole stuff in the doctor's office, and scheduling stuff and the scans and when the surgery is going to be. And we go out to the parking lot and we're both losing it. We don't, because we're both confused and what's going on. And then we get a hold of the doctor that she works with, that she had worked several stuff cases with, and he says they'll get us in the next day. And a peace came about her, like I said, that you could only account to God. It was God's got this. We're going to be fine. We just have to go through all these steps and get it done. Um, but those steps were, like she said, for 2 years. I tried to forget how many surgeries she had, but I think we were up around 18, 16, something like that, surgeries within a 2 year period. And Angela doesn't like to do things once. She always wants to do things twice. So no matter what surgery she had, it was, oh, an infection or this happened or that happened, and it was always, we did everything twice. So that's why we ended up with so many surgeries in a 2.5 year period. Luckily, the place I work were awesome. I went to every chemo appointment. I was over in when she had reconstructive surgery over in Utah, up at the Huntsman. I basically got to work remotely. I got to go. I stayed up there. Angela was in intensive care for, I think, a week, if I remember right. And I stayed at a little place down in Utah, down in Salt Lake. It was kind of accounted for as the hospital, so they allowed me to stay. It was kind of like a hotel room. So it just a lot of stuff that happened, that everything from having to sit down and tell the kids what were going on, to telling family members, um, and then just the battle in your head with what if she dies.
Except I told everybody I wasn't. I told everybody I wasn't having it.
She could do that, but I mean, there were times that that I would, because I want to be the strong husband, be there for her, we're gonna do this together, all that stuff. Um, but there were times I would go upstairs and just cry it out for you know 45 minutes, and because I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know what was going to go on. I mean, the doctors were great when filling us in, but when you go to the oncologist and I learned later on why they do this is because they lose so many cancer patients, but she was very standoffish. Um, the questions were very straightforward answered. There was no, normally you go to a doctor and say, hey, how's your day? Hey, my day's going great, and you talk about things. This gal was very, very standoffish, and which freaked me out because it's like, well, she's putting on a front and she's got to be putting on a front for a reason. And this is obviously worse than maybe we thought it was. And it was bad. I mean, if Angela wouldn't have gone through the stuff that she did with chemo, and the radiation and the surgeries and all that stuff, she probably would not be here today. I truly believe that. So, but it's tough, especially when it comes to chemo, because Angela was the toughest person I've ever met. We'd have chemo on Fridays, and she would go back to work on Monday, and she worked Monday through Friday, and then or Monday through Thursday, and then I would take her back in for chemo on Friday again. And it sucked because by Friday she was feeling pretty good again. And then I knew on that drive over to chemo that when we're having a conversation, we're talking about things and hey, what's going on this week and all that kind of stuff. But then I knew the minute we got out of there, she was down and out. I mean, she was feeling horrible. She was throwing up. She's all this stuff. And so it sucks to go in there and see that she had a port put in, and then the minute they plug her in, that within the next 20 minutes she's going to feel like crap, and she's going to feel like crap the rest of the weekend. And it's going to be and it's horrible when your spouse is not feeling well, and it's even worse when it's cancer that's not making them feel well, because there's nothing you can do. All you can do is try to make them feel comfortable and make sure they have everything they need and that they got plenty of water, but somehow you still have to figure out how to keep moving forward, because we have two kids. We got one that's barely in high school and one that's in junior high, and we're still working high school issues and junior high issues and school and homework, and somebody's got to make dinner, and the house has got to stay straightened up, and all the little things. The dogs still have to be fed, the cat still has to be fed, the dogs still have to go for walks. You still have to do all life and still try to make it through, with everything else it's running through your head. So it's a lot.
Tell me this, man, because I told you I have a good friend that his wife went through breast cancer also.
Mm-hmm.
And me as the friend wanted to be helpful in some ways, right? And so I'd call him periodically, like, hey, man, can I come mow your lawn? Can I come help her? And he'd always say, no, man, we got it. And it really made me wonder, from your perspective, what did you really need from your friends?
I told Angela's story a lot because everybody, when they see you, how's Angela? What's going on? What's she doing? Where are you at? With everything. Um, I told her story, and you almost get exhausted from telling the story. Um, I would have loved to somebody say, "Hey, man, let's go grab coffee. I want to talk," and for have a buddy of mine to say, "Hey, dude, how are you doing?" Because everyone wants to know how Angela's doing, which I totally understand, but I can't think of very many times that I ever had somebody say, "Hey, how are you doing?" That would have been cool.
Mm.
Probably would have lost it, but
Yeah, I felt like my buddy had hmm,
I think that
gotten forgotten in that, right?
the other thing that I think more than anything, and I think Angela was this way too, is um, you don't want to be seen as somebody that's sick, somebody that's like our family's broken or something.
I actually struggled with that a lot. I didn't want, I remember when I went to the police department to tell the patrol teams, because I mean, that's a different type of family, but it's a family. And I told them that I had been diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. And I said, but I'm not dying. I'm fine. I don't want you to treat me any differently. And I really didn't want people to treat me differently. And until my hair fell out, only people who knew me knew. But then when my hair came out and everybody looks at you like with this, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, don't do, I don't want your pity. I'm still moving. I'm still going forward. I kept telling people, don't treat me like I'm dying because I'm living. And it's hard to, and Jeremy references, I mean, I had a moment with God where surrender has always been hard for me. I have a career that I've controlled things all my life, right? I had to control things when I was growing up because of circumstances. And to be able to just say to God, I cannot do this. This is none of this is of me. I'll do whoever you put in my path. I'll go see those doctors, but I am totally turning all of this over to you. I will keep doing what you've asked me to do with my life, which is why I kept working. People are like, why are you here? And I said, because I'm taking care of what he asked me to do, and he's taking care of the rest. And I remember after that happened, I actually caught a cold, and I remember like laughing with God and said, are you really trying to make sure I'm trusting you with everything? I had that conversation with him. And I had people coming up and saying, talking about the light they saw in my eyes, and, just how hopeful I was and how I was blessing them. And what what I said is, I don't know why he's using me as a vessel, but if he's using me as a vessel to impact your life, I'm glad that he is. But that is truly not me you're seeing. It's not my strength. It's not because I'm a control freak. I'm a worrywart. What you're seeing is, if you're going to praise something, praise God for that, because that's exactly what you're seeing as I walk through this.
Yeah, man. Both of you have kind of alluded to people treating you normally was what you were craving during that time, huh? All right, you sweaty buggers. That liquid dripping off your forehead and down your back contains minerals that are critical for high performance. If you don't put those minerals back, you're not going to perform well. This is where salty electrolytes comes in. Salt contains 6 electrolyte minerals plus a touch of iodine to help you replenish after a hard workout. Salt is the only electrolyte supplement to pair every mineral with its counterpart, giving you the most robust mineral profile on the market, period. Head over to goearnyoursalt.com today to get some for yourself. Use the code GOEARNYOURSALT to get 15% off your first order. And now, my friends, go earn your salt.
Yep. Yeah, it was,
Man.
and it drew, I don't know if Jeremy's told you, it also drew community attention. The police department, my chief was getting ready to retire, Craig Kingsbury, and I went down to have a lunch with him, and he always shaved his head, so it didn't faze me. But when I got hospitalized with a really bad infection, and when I was there, my hair started coming out in big clumps, and came home, and that was hard because I knew I had to. Now people were going to know. I went in and shaved my head, and then Jeremy came out and he shaved his head, and then we go down for this luncheon, and we're leaving, and I'm talking to Craig and his wife as we're walking out, and I don't even realize what's happening, and I look out the door, and there's just lines of people, and I look up and I realize who these people are that are standing outside in hats. It's the police department, and it's women, 5 women from the police department, and it's Jeremy, and it's firefighters, and it's one of the guy's kids, and they all take off their hat. It's the SWAT team. They all take off their hats, and every one of them would shake their heads. I'm never at a loss for words, and I couldn't speak. And then that made the news, and then the news wanted to do stories, because they, our community knew who I was, a lot of people in our community, and then they wanted to do a follow up story when my year out, and people wanted me to come and do the Stampede for the Cure, which I refused to do. I mean, I understood why they wanted me to do it, but I kept saying, I don't want to be known for that. I don't want to be known as the poor cop who had cancer. Remember me for the work I did at the Justice Center. And so, I mean, now I would do something like that because I truly understand. They thought, because a lot of people knew who I was, that if they saw me going through it, would give people courage. But I didn't want to be known for that.
I think that's an important point because sometimes, I don't know, sometimes we get handed a mantle we're not really ready to accept, right? And gosh, that's a cool take on what you're talking about because I don't know that I would have thought about it from that perspective, but you almost have to get to this place where you're humble enough to just accept the love people are throwing at you, right?
We had so much of that. We had so much of that everywhere, from Jeremy's work to people at our church to the police department. I mean, we were so blessed through all of that. I can't, well, first of all, I can't imagine going through something like that without having God in your life. And I definitely can't imagine going through something like that without the community that we had around us.
Families were awesome. They got behind everything. And different people and neighbors that would bring food over. And I mean, there was at some point I was like, hey guys, I cook. We really don't need all this food,
I
but
better.
it was nice that people cared enough to want to do that, which was awesome. Lots of people. I mean, I had a buddy and his wife, the Kegels, that at that time we were actually in the middle of a kitchen remodel, of all things, and all the baseboards all had to be painted, and I was trying to get everything back put together. During this whole entire situation, and of course Angela couldn't help me much, so they came over and helped me paint them all in the garage. We just had a really good group of friends and family that supported us all through that. Obviously, with the kids still in school, and I'm taking Angela to Utah for a week at a time. Family members that stepped up to stay with the kids and make sure things were still going in the right direction with them. So yeah, it was good. Good
Yeah.
support.
Did you at any point in that, Jeremy, have a hard time accepting that help?
Oh yeah, yeah. Even somebody asking to mow the lawn, I'm like, no, the lawn's mine. It's that's what I do. And sometimes I think that's what people have to think about too is you have to do stuff to get your mind off things. Mowing the lawn was something I could still do, and it got me away from everything for a few minutes. Um,
Mhm.
so to have normal everyday life still happen is probably what carried me through more than anything. It was, hey, the kids still got to get to school and they still have to get dressed, and I have to get them up and get them moving, and we still have to pack lunches, and we still have to make dinner, and I still have to go to work, and so there's all those things that I think you can't just stop life. You have to keep moving, and I think that helped a ton.
That's interesting because that's what my friend told me when I offered to mow his lawn. He said, that's the one where I can just sit out there and let that motor run,
Yep.
turn my mind off, and draw lines across the yard. It's yeah. He used that exact same chore as his therapy, right?
I love to go. I mean, you know me, I like to fish. I like to hunt. Um, Fishing is one of those things where you can kick back on a river with a fly rod and everything kind of floats away. Having a buddy go, hey, let's go fishing. That would be awesome. would have been really cool. Hey, let's go fishing. Hey, let's go hunting. Let's go for a hike. Let's go up to the mountains. That kind of stuff would have been. I would take that over somebody asking to do a chore for me, because chores, like you said, they're every normal day life, and that's kind of what keeps things normal.
Yeah. That is, I hope people are listening to that, because I think we all wonder, right?
Oh yeah,
We all wonder, like, how can you help people the most? And because everyone wanted to help you, right? Everyone had this thing, but
yeah.
yeah, you don't often know. And sometimes it's hard to know what to do that's really actually going to be helpful and not annoying, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, that's
I
good
had
info, you
a
guys.
period of time at the police department where they actually got to a point where they put a sign up on our door coming back into my division that said, if you're here to check on Angela, talk to Christy first. Because these guys, these big, strong guys from the police department were messes. They'd come back and they'd known me for years, and they were looking at me like I was dying. They were treating me like I was dying. They were crying, and I'm like, I'm fine, I'm fine. And they're coming in for all these updates, and I'm like, I'm working. I don't want to talk. I got a light switch. I don't want to talk about this here, But they were, everybody was concerned, but it was, the having to talk about it all the time. When we were trying to live, I mean, I love that we had so much support, but we were trying to live life too.
No, I remember the other gal with breast cancer said that the worst thing for her was to get in these what does she call them, like these cancer support groups. She said she went in a couple of those. She said she just stopped going because they were such downers. Everyone was, you know,
Yeah, I didn't go to
almost,
those.
yeah,
I
probably for the same reason, huh?
Yeah, well, I literally was trying, I was living like I was living, not like I was dying. And I think,
Yeah.
I've known some other people and some other friends of ours that I've heard them say, they don't want to leave the house. They don't want to get out of bed. They don't want, and yeah, those things are sometimes hard to do. But when you're just laying there waiting to die, that's not how I wanted to live anything. And so sitting around and I'm not saying that those support groups are bad. I mean, some people just need those, but I mean, we were doing everything. If the doctors recommended it, we talked about it. And we did. I mean, I was the 1% of the 1%. If the 1% is going to go wrong, it was me twice. Over and over and over again. But we still, just wanted to. So we were doing all of that, but we were also just trying to live our life.
Man. You guys have, I mean, it's heavy, right? We're talking about it and we're all three of us here trying not to tear up. And I'm having a hard time even getting half these questions out because it's, heavy subject. And,
Yeah.
but I've gotten to see you on the backside because we've known each other for the last, 6 or 8 years is all. But, so it was after that battle that we got to know you guys. And, but I've got to see what you've done with life since. It's pretty impressive. I want to switch gears here into just some much lighter questions. Okay. Some of these will be fun and silly. Some of them be, maybe a little more serious, but not more serious than we've already been going through. So are you guys game for that?
Yeah.
Okay. So you guys, this is called the Go Earn Your Salt podcast. And I would like to hear from you just briefly what that phrase "go earn your salt" means to you.
Well, knowing what your business is and what salt is, um, but even if I didn't know it, I would say if somebody said go earn your salt, the first thing I think about with salt is salt and light. Um, Jesus talking about salt and light. Um, Salt can be really bad and it can be really good. It it sustains life and it also preserves dead things. So I mean, there's lots of things that salt can be used for. When I first think about go earn your salt, is that God has a calling for each and every one of us, and that He calls us to be salt and light. and that you need to go out and do everything you can to do what God has called you to do in your life. All of us have a calling, each and every one of us, and none of them are higher ranked than anything else. Some may say that Angela's calling was much bigger than my calling. My calling was to be a support for my wife in all that she does. And I don't mind being the guy behind the scenes. It really doesn't bother me whatsoever. I love the fact that I get to help and be part of the calling that Angela has. And that's actually what we're doing tonight. We're going to do some stuff with Camp Hope kids. And it's awesome that we get to go do those things with them, and see the strides that each one of those kids make. We got another the hero walk on Saturday through Nampa. Of course, we're going to be there. We're going to be walking for that. So yeah, when I hear go earn your salt, I hear go do what God has called you to do, to be that salt and light of this world.
Dang. Top that, Angela.
That's it. Ditto. And I think, I think I very similar, but I think about, what am I leaving on the world? How am I seasoning it, if you will? And have I earned that well? The thing with the light is kind of funny because I remember going to a women's group, a retreat, that Melanie Tucker was leading. First time I'd ever done anything like that. And they're having us close our eyes and asking what, that she said, just listen to what God calls you. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I've never done anything like that before. And I'm like, what do you mean? What does he call me? And, and we were just supposed to share like the word we heard. And everybody's going around, princess chosen, and I'm like, I didn't hear a word. I just saw a really, really bright light. And, and Melanie said, because that's what you're called to be. You're called to be the light in people's darkness, and that's what you're seeing. And so when I think of, what am I leaving, am I doing enough, am I leaving something that's going to be meaningful to others, when I'm gone.
Yeah. I said this was going to be light, and then there you go, making it all teary again. Guys, what's your favorite pastimes outside of, the cool job and ministry stuff you do?
Jeremy would say fishing. I would say catching. I'm not a fisherman. I'm a catcherman. If we can be catching, I like to get competitive and I like to catch more fish, but I don't like to just sit out there with the rod for 4 hours.
Oh my
We like to
goodness.
vacation and go to the mountains too a lot.
Yeah,
Jeremy?
mine's fishing and hunting. I love to bird hunt. I love shooting guns. It's just fun to go out and shoot, whether I'm shooting clay pigeons. And it's not so much about the hunting and the fishing and the clay pigeons or whatever you're doing. It's about hanging out with your buddies. It's about that camaraderie. It's a great time. That's, at least the older I get, that's what it's about. It's about my friends, hanging out with friends, other guys, meeting new people, being out in God's country, up in the mountains, wherever it may be. You could be in a cornfield, could be down on the Snake River. It that to me is just the best time.
Oh man. What is something about each of you that's a little quirky that people don't know about?
Quirky?
I can see Angela's looking at Jeremy. She knows some stuff.
Well, I'm trying to think of.
Quirky. My wife, I guess you could say it's quirky. She used to be really, really, really bad. She's not as bad anymore, but she's a little OCD. Especially when it
No.
comes to, when it comes to, I remember it was kind of funny when we were first dating. I had a house that was over in Boise here, behind the old Pojos over there, and I had some coffee tables and stuff like that, and Angela and I had kind of been somewhat trying to figure out, okay, we're going to get married, we're going to move in together. What are we going to do here? And this was kind of before both of us were really Christians, and so she was somewhat living with me, but she still had her apartment in Nampa. But she was really OCD with stuff, and I would purposely go in, and on the end table, we'd have a lamp, and you'd have a couple little trinkets or whatever, and I would move things, and she would come in the door and move it back without even saying, hey, how come this is out of place? She, you go to her closet, and her closet is organized with long sleeves, short sleeves, colors, which way the face of the shirt has to face. When you fold pants, they have to have the pocket out so you know what pair of jeans it is. And she still does this today. She still says I fold towels wrong, which I don't understand how you fold towels wrong, but in washcloths. But yeah, I think that's where her quirkiness is she's kind of a little OCD on things.
Yeah.
Fire back,
Yeah,
Angela.
I don't know if it's quirky, but I think it would surprise a lot of people because he talks a lot about his hunting and fishing and like loving to watch football and stuff like that. He talks about hunting and fishing and sports, but I think a lot of people would be surprised. I mean, this guy can sew, he can embroider. He's a excellent cook. Everything is by taste. Like I go take him if I find something at a restaurant, I take him to that restaurant and say, "How do we make this? How do you make this at home?" That he can, he sings, he plays the piano, he plays the drums, he can dance, which is the reason I married him. That's what I told him. That was a requirement. He had to know how to dance. And I think a lot of people, don't know, like he just has all of these different talents and all these things that he can do. He can paint.
Dude,
He's an artist. Yeah.
we're gonna have an event at the coffee shop next Thursday. Then Jeremy, we're gonna have a good time.
That's what I was just thinking.
You're like, oh crap, these guys. So this cooking and this stuff. What's your favorite food?
His chicken fettuccine Alfredo. I don't eat it in restaurants. I love chicken fettuccine Alfredo. There's actually only one restaurant now that I will eat it in. But his is and when the volleyball team used to come over when it was our not time to cook, Jeremy would cook that. The family would come over, Jeremy would cook because his chicken fettuccine Alfredo is really, really good.
Mm. How
My
about you,
favorite,
Jeremy?
my favorite, man, I love smoking meat. I love barbecue. Um, Between brisket and ribs, and tri-tip,
Mm.
I don't even think I could even choose, but those are, and I do love seafood too, but smoked meat it's good stuff.
Yeah.
I just said ice cream because truly that is my favorite food.
Angela's favorite food is ice cream. Yeah.
I didn't like ice cream as a kid,
Oh,
but
I
as
love
an
it.
adult, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I wish I didn't like it.
Yeah, I kind of am the same way, but oh, it's good.
Yeah.
Um, what is the best advice you've ever received?
Um, I actually remember my mom, it was actually about marriage. I remember my mom telling me that being married was going to be the hardest job I ever had, but if I worked hard at it, it'd be worth it.
Mm.
And, 30 years, almost 30 years later,
Yeah. Almost 30.
32 together.
Yeah.
It's
We'll be at
cute.
29 this year. So,
Yeah.
best advice I was ever given. Own up to your mistakes. If you make a mistake, own up to it, live with the consequences, and move on. And do everything you can not to make that mistake again. That was passed down from my dad, and also heard it from one of my bosses here. It's just, it's funny when especially when you're in a higher position at work, um, people think that you don't make mistakes. And you have to remind people that, hey, yeah, there are times I do make mistakes. We do it even with our kids, I think it's super important for your kids to know that parents are not perfect. And maybe I yelled or said something I shouldn't have said or whatever it may be. I think it's super important that you sit down with your kids and you let them know, hey, man, I made a mistake, because you're modeling for your kids that, hey, it's okay to make mistakes, and that it's part of life, and it's how you learn from those mistakes and what you do with that afterwards, instead of lying about it or brushing it under the rug
Yeah.
or whatever it may be. So
Yeah, that's the thing, because people that are close to you know when you made a mistake.
yeah,
But your reaction to that, I think, is that's good stuff, man.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, what's an item on your bucket list that you want to do in life before it's all over?
We do so much stuff that we are kind of homebodies. So I can't even say it's really traveling stuff. Um, I don't know. What do you think? Would yours be a travel thing, or what do you think?
Didn't have a bucket list, I don't think. I feel like we've been so blessed by opportunities and stuff with our family and friends and places we've got to see and things we've got to do. Um, I don't I don't know that I've never even I know I've never really truly had a bucket list.
Yeah, and I would say mine's kind of the same thing. I really have never really made a bucket list. I think we are super blessed. We get to do a lot of things, and we have fantastic family, and we are kind of homebodies. So, yeah, we get to go out and do some things every once in a while, but we enjoy coming home. We have an awesome family. It, we're pretty blessed people. I, I
No,
can't.
I love it. It's funny because a lot of times people mention travel, right?
Yeah.
And I always kind of got to agree because I've said it several times on this podcast. I'd love to go see the castles back in like Ireland or,
Hmm.
the
Yeah.
UK or
Totally.
Europe. That would be cool. Um, but I think, when I think of that question, for me, it's not really where I could go so much as it's experiences I could have or things I could learn about, right?
Mm.
I got to build a knife a few years ago with my father-in-law. He's a knife maker, right? And I just thought that was so cool to see what went into that.
Yeah.
And my knives look terrible when they're finished because I've only done a couple of them, but they're mine. I did
Yeah.
it from a little hunk of metal to a finished knife, and
Yeah.
and they're cool because of that.
That's
So,
cool.
um, your favorite book of all time, and everyone says the Bible, so I say except or
Mm.
other than the Bible, what's your favorite book of all time?
Where the Red Fern Grows. I loved that
Read it
book.
in fourth grade. I love that book. I was just talking about it to Simon yesterday.
Yes, it was that. But I still remember how much I cried, but how much I loved that book.
That's a good one. Yes.
Mine's the Shack. Uh,
Yeah.
the Shack.
I've never read that one.
It was the only book. I'm not a book reader. I'm really not. I can listen to podcasts. I can do everything else. I just can't just sit down and read a book very well. My attention span's just not great with it. But I remember the Shack. I started reading it. I couldn't put it down. I finished it at like 3 o'clock in the morning. I seriously could not. I just the vivid imagery that I had in my head, the way as I was reading it and it all came together, it was just probably the most impactful book because it explained the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit so well that it totally made sense.
Just hit you where you're at the time, right? And I
Yeah,
think
it
that's
did. Totally.
yeah.
Yeah. Then we went and watched the movie. So actually, we watched the movie before Angela had surgery up in Utah for cancer. We went to the movie
Hmm.
that night before she went in for surgery.
What's next for you guys? What's the next challenge you're going to take on? This next season of life.
You know, well, after Dakota gets married, it's going to be becoming grandparents. That's going to be, I mean, I think because we know that, in the next few years, it'll probably be Dakota getting married with McKaylee getting married this last year. But I think our next big challenge is going to be, I don't know that it'll be challenge, but our next, and I look forward to that. I mean, I just look forward to continuing to see how our family grows and seeing how we raised our kids, how that turns into how they raise their kids.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Yeah, for real. How about you, Jeremy?
Um, I would like to get to retirement at some point. Not Angela's type of retirement, but um, actually, I don't. I actually, the more I think about watching Angela and what she does, I think I would probably be better in life if I did retire like she did, where you have lots of things to do. Whether it's volunteering your time, I keep think of multiple things that I could volunteer my time for. Whether that's a ministry or stuff down at the Family Justice Center, I think it'd be really cool to volunteer my time in helping young kids with woodworking or
Mm.
learning how to do things, with their hands. Um, I, I, I mean, I've spent my career working with my hands, so I think that would be really cool to be able to sit down with some kids and volunteer your time to do that with some kind of organization. So,
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I'm at some point, retirement's just going to be another project. It's going to,
right.
for
It's
real.
not like you have to be there every morning at 5:30 a.m. So, yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I look forward to.
that's awesome, you guys. All right, well, we're going to wrap this thing up. This has been a really fun conversation. I'm sitting here looking at this list of questions I have and how many more of them I could ask you guys, because I feel like, we've been going 2 hours almost on the dot now,
Yeah.
and I could double this real easy having this conversation. So I appreciate you guys setting aside the time to do this. I know it's been a long time coming, and I'm just jacked that we finally got it done.
Yeah, for
Thanks
sure.
for having us. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks,
Yeah.
Riley. Appreciate it, buddy.
Go earn your salt, you two.
All right. Sounds good.
Hey, you've just finished up this episode, and I want to know, are you or someone you know a getting after it, go earn your salt type of person? If so, message me directly on Instagram at the Go Earn Your Salt podcast, and perhaps we can have you on the show. Also, if you like this content, leave us a review, subscribe, and share with your friends. And perhaps this podcast can help you and them go earn your salt.